Hey guys, real quick shout out to our buddies over at Buzzard Roost Saddles. Buzzard Roost Saddles was born in the swamps of Santa Maria, South Louisiana, and their purpose is to get you standing over your next carcass so you can pick them clean. I'm excited to be able to now offer you a 10% discount on Buzzard Roost Saddle hunting gear. If you're looking to get into the saddle hunting game or are looking to change your current saddle setup, be sure to check out Buzzard Roost Saddles. Use code HTWPC10 at buzzardroostsaddles.com to save 10% today. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hunt the Wild podcast. I'm your host, Adam Bowlds. Today I'm joined with Jared Wells, my coworker, actually. So he works with me in Southern Indiana, but he's a old Kentuckian, lives in Owensboro, Kentucky. He's been a hunter most of his life or all of his life, but new to the bow hunting world. So we're going to do a little flip-flop interview and let him kind of ask the questions. And I think this is going to give you guys maybe more so newer archery hunters, but it'll give you the chance to kind of hear some questions that maybe new archery hunters and maybe experienced archery hunters might want to pick up on some tips. So I'm going to hand over the reins to Jared, have him introduce himself a little bit just to get some background, and then he's going to take over the show, and I'm going to sit back and be the guest. So, Jared, you go ahead and take the reins. This one's all you. Introduce yourself, and we'll roll with it.
So I was born and raised in Southern Indiana, moved to Kentucky 2 years ago, have hunted my whole life. No waterfowl, just squirrels, rabbits, really love, whitetail, just hunted for it all. And I'm shot bows my whole life, but never actually hunted with them, just never found a reason. And this year's going to be the first year for it. And I think that you soak up so much information from these people. And yeah, I could sit down and watch 51 of your episodes and try to catch the things I'm looking for. Whereas I think people want to hear what you know. Nobody's no one's picking through the brain of Adam Bowlds. And I think that's what the people need.
Yeah. So basically what he's saying is he's going to be selfish and rob me for an hour or two and just pick my brain. Although this happens a lot at work, might as well record it and let everybody else kind of get in on some of it too. So it'll be interesting to see which direction this goes. If it ends up informational and comical, or all informational. But Jared, you jump in. You're the host. I'm the guest. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'd say at work, we'll start with 5 minutes of information to every 55 minutes of just bullshit. So, for starters, what, like you started, I'm assuming we shotgun hunt because up until now, the last 2 years, it's been shotgun only, no rifle. Now it's changed. Right. So you've been shotgun hunting, as have I. What did somebody in your family like bow hunt, or did you just take it upon yourself to do that?
So, I grew up shotgun hunting, of course. I remember a story in particular, way far back. I would estimate I was probably 6 years old at this point. My dad took me and my brother up to, I guess I'll go ahead and name the town, Tennyson, Indiana, which is about 40 minutes from my house. He had permission there. And he took my brother and me and him, and he took his bow up there. And of course, at 6 years old, I'm probably not sitting in a tree stand. So we're all sitting up against a log. And my dad has his bow, and he's probably not planning on killing anything. And I'm sitting there with there's an old school red kid's bow, like you could probably pull it back with your tongue. Um, and he gives me an arrow with a broadhead, and he's like sticks it in the ground. He's like, "Don't touch it unless you see a deer." And my brother's doing like the same kind of thing. Well, we're sitting on this log, and gray light comes in, and a couple of does come to about 30 yards. When there's a buck, a massive, massive buck at like 40 yards. And it's just, this is before they had any kind of glow pins, any kind of thing like that. My dad was probably not preparing to shoot this deer. He's sitting on the ground. He's got two young kids with him. So anyway, we're watching this buck, and it's massive. And a couple weeks or a couple months down the road, I believe it was either a county record or a state record, which obviously would have been less at the time than it is now, was killed right up the road from that wood. So we've always kind of joked that it was probably that deer. But I guess that would be my first introduction to bow hunting. Um, and then as I got older, 16 or so, and started driving, a guy that I used to hang out with had kind of messed around with bow hunting. And he's like, "You want to go? You want to go?" And we had another buddy who was like, "I got a bow you can use." So we literally planned this hunt to go to, well, there's a piece of public land near our homes. I won't mention, but the strip mine area. And I was like, "Yeah, I'll go, man." So we took our clothes with us to school, and we changed in the parking lot. We drove to this other buddy's house, grabbed the bow, and went out for a hunt. And we didn't see anything. I didn't know really what I was doing when it came to bow hunting. I took a bow with me I had never shot. It was way too long or way too short. I never had pulled it back. I had no business doing that. But that was, I guess, my first bow hunt. And then after that, I kind of just took the dive in. I bought a used Hoyt. I can't even remember the exact style of Hoyt, but I bought a used Hoyt, and I practiced and hunted with it. Um, yeah, and then kind of the rest is history. It took me about 3 years, 2 or 3 years, to kill my first deer with a bow, which ended up being killed on that same piece of public land where we had first bow hunted, just a different section. And I thought it was a doe. Ended up being it was tagged as a doe, but it was less than 3-inch spike buck. Made a liver shot, tracked it by myself, drug it out, and after that, I was pretty well hooked. I wasn't going to miss any more after that, but I kind of taught myself how to bow hunt mostly, just a little introduction from my dad and the buddy. But as far as learning how to shoot, playing the wind, I didn't grow up playing the wind. I grew up going to a stand that was already there. So yeah, I mostly am self-taught, and it's usually through trial and error, mostly failure.
Right. It's funny how in Indiana, only using a shotgun, it's so. We were grinding to get deer coming up. Like it was tough just because of the distance and the accuracy, the whole thing. So the hunt itself was a little bit like the learning curve is a little bit steeper, I feel like. Just you got to be even more careful. So, and also, the best way to learn I've found is to just get skunked, not literally, metaphorically, time and time and time again. And that's what has happened to me. Like for years, it's happened. I'll jump a deer, going to put my stand up, and nothing will come within a mile of me. So you're like, is it because I smell? Which way is the wind? And you start like breaking it down because you just wasted a whole weekend sitting by yourself in a tree. So I feel like we had a better opportunity to learn in denser woods, that it's harder. And I'm not taking anything away from Utah, Montana, but they have their stalking and they're shooting 308s and distances that I feel like it's a little bit easier. I'm sure somebody would bark right back at me about how it's not. But now that we can use rifles, I feel like it's so much easier in my mind, like the game of it. That deer I saw when I was 12, that was 150 yards away, and I was looking through my shotgun scope, and I'm like, I just can't do it. Now that deer is gone. It's a goner.
Yeah.
Nope. So like I got the rifle, and now I'm like, how do I make this hard again? And
Yeah, it is interesting because you look at, we just geographically painting the picture for anybody. We are located from my house. I can drive to Kentucky in 10 minutes or less, which has always been allowed to use rifles, but I didn't grow up hunting over there. But you look at that and you're like, those people can set up in a box blind with a 4-year-old kid who can play on an iPad and color pictures and just like have whatever. He's basically in a shoot house with a rifle. It seems, it's just a totally different world compared to what we did right across the river 10 minutes away in Indiana, because a lot of us spent a lot of time in, maybe just me, but we spent a lot of time with shotguns and in the woods hoping that a deer was going to come within 30, 40, 50, 60 yards. So at the time, yeah, it was hard hunting with the shotgun, but I think it set me to a point to where the deer had to get close, which is what I needed to bow hunt. So it was kind of like really teaching me the whole time. I had never shot a deer over 40 yards prior to last year. Last year was the first time I have ever hunted with a high powered rifle. Both Kentucky and Indiana, I ended up shooting 6 or 7 deer. But not that it's too easy, but it's definitely easier. I would say out of the deer that I killed, let's see, the buck and that doe, I would say 2 of those deer, one of them I shot with a bow, it's fairly close, 25 yards. The other doe was about 15. All the other deer were over 80 to 100 yards. I would have never in my lifetime shot those with a shotgun. I would have never even thought about shooting those deer with a shotgun. So it is interesting, kind of going into the rifle game. But yeah, I think the shotgun thing, I think it preps you for bow hunting. And if you're like me, I didn't grow up hunting with a slug gun. I grew up hunting with a Remington Wingmaster with rifled slugs. So they've got to be pretty. I mean, you're not getting 100 yards with that thing. They've got to be fairly close.
yeah, that's tough. I did not know that. So I had
Yeah.
a slug gun, and when we sighted it in, it was like we'd do it at 75 and just judge. But that first day, we'd walk in. I walked in there with my stand like a month before, and a doe came arm's length from me and stopped. I was frozen. It was frozen. We just stared at each other for like, I swear to you, 2 minutes. It what felt like 2 minutes, anyways. And I was like, oh, this is good. I put my stand up like 20 yards from that spot and was like, I'm going to smoke that thing in the morning. Go out there and nothing. I didn't kill a deer at all. I saw one deer the whole season and it was way too far and it was staring right at me. And I was like, okay, I got to get better. I got to do something different. And the whole time, coming up, I don't know about you, but the whole time we're like stuck with shotguns, and I didn't get to hunt Kentucky, but
I didn't either.
oh my gosh, if I could just use a rifle, like life would be so much better. You want it so bad, and then you get rifle season now in Indiana, and you're like, how can I make this? It's like going back. As soon as you get something you want, and you're like, it's not as fun. Like it is, we're going out there
Yeah.
to eat, but now I'm like trying to make it difficult on myself again. It's funny how it's cyclical, I guess. But
Yeah, I mean, I guess you wouldn't. I mean, if I went out and shot a deer every time, obviously I'd be eating good. But I don't think I would be as attracted to it. I mean, if it's just so easy, I mean, it's not really hunting at that point, really. It's really killing. So I really enjoy the whole aspect of everything. Um, Shooting the deer is kind of my least favorite part, even though that's the ultimate goal. But
Yeah,
I will say I don't know if I've ever told this story, but I'll go ahead and tell it. With the guy that introduced me kind of to my first bow hunt, other than my dad, this buddy that I went to high school with, he's like, we got some property that we have permission on. If you want to go hunting with me and my dad, you can go with us in the morning. She's like, just bring a 5-gallon bucket, sit on that. So we roll up to the woods, grab my 5-gallon white bucket, take a walk into this woods I've never been in my life, set up against a little tree. And sure enough, here comes a doe about an hour into the sit, walking right towards me. Gets to 10 or 15 yards, just staring right at me. I'm like, I'm shooting this deer. So sitting on this bucket and I draw my bow back. I aim right between its legs. I'm going straight for the heart, heart and lung, frontal shot, which is not ideal. I didn't know any better. Release the arrow. Boom. Right into the tree next to her, about 2
Oh my
yards. Stuck the broadhead right in the tree. She stood there, shaking like a leaf, trying to get another arrow on there. She's doing the old doe kick where she's just kicking her foot, slapping. I'm thinking, oh shit. Now she's gonna charge me. Like it's like a matriarch doe. This isn't no young doe. She knows what's going on, and I'll never forget that. I thought, 15 yards. This is just a walk in the park. I walked in here, put a bucket down. I'm just gonna smoke this deer, and it's not that hard. This bow hunting stuff's not that hard. I'm telling you, when you think it's that easy, is when it gets hard.
Underestimating. Yeah.
Yes.
So something else just dawned on me. I learned this earlier. Bone collectors, as we talked about the other day, which the stigma behind the sticker is
Yeah.
ass cheeks, but they're knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
Who they sponsor and everything. The hunters themselves was basically saying like, when you draw on a deer, you want to be aiming like right at the bottom of their shoulder, like literally, like you would almost shoot under it.
Mm-hmm.
Because 99% of the time, the videos that you watch with people missing, they duck, like they drop down, and then you shoot hard. So like go, uh, just compensate for it ahead of time, which it never occurred to me. And shooting a gun, then moving it's not moving at the speed that a rifle round is moving at. So there is time for the deer to react, which is crazy. Like, if I'm just grateful I saw that earlier because I never would have thought of it. Never occurred to me.
Yeah, ducking the arrow is quite common. I will say I am a small guy. I'm only 5'8" and 140, 150 pounds. So I've always shot smaller axle to axle bows, and I've always shot low poundage, which causes me to never shoot over 30 yards. I've never shot a deer over 30 yards with a bow. Now, there are guys that do shoot 60, 70, 80 yards, and I think that's more prevalent for those kind of guys because the arrow, obviously, it has to travel twice the distance. So the deer has a little more time to duck. It's not too much of an issue, or I haven't noticed it much of an issue for me because that arrow is there and impacted at 10, 20, 30 yards pretty fast. But yeah, the ducking the arrow thing, I usually, I mostly am a double lung guy when I aim. I'm not usually going for a heart shot with a bow. It just seems to work out that way for me. I feel like sometimes, they say aim small, miss small, which I try to do, but I don't know, something about that heart being so small and the lungs being just a tad bit bigger. I go for the double lung shots just to kind of keep myself safe so I don't, have the deer kind of duck the arrow just in case they do duck the arrow, or just in case they, scoot out of the way really quick. But yeah, I don't think I don't think unless you're going to shoot very far, it should be too much of an issue.
Boy, I'm sure glad I brought that up because when I heard it, I was like, that is profound information. And
Yeah,
I was getting ready to shoot 6 inches under a deer. And
yeah.
then so with like it'll be on camera and I'm gonna either kill the deer and I'm gonna cry, or I'm gonna miss it by 6 inches and then I'm still gonna cry. So like yeah.
So if you guys are looking for a YouTube video of some guy hunting, either if he's successful or not, that Jared's
Check.
planning on getting filmed quite a bit this year, and I'm going to be doing the filming because I love to film and I never have anybody to film. So if you're looking for that emotional stuff, if you want to laugh with him or cry with him, plan
Oh
on that coming soon.
yeah, it'll be both for sure. And this is why we're here, because that's something that I needed to learn, which um, I'm not going to dive too far into the crossbow situation. We've had the conversation. You've had the conversation. People, you're not going to convince anybody otherwise, like their opinions of it and blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. Granted, crossbow is something that is fairly new to Indiana as well. Like the regulations, all rifle, crossbow, it all kind of changed in the same 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's only about, I would say, gosh, maybe 6 years now.
But the
That
same, um, sorry, the same applies. I feel like if you're going to shotgun hunt deer, it takes some thinking and planning and a lot of thought and practice to know what you're using, the distance, everything. It takes a lot of thought and skill. Whereas rifles, when it changed for people, they're like, oh, I have a rifle in my safe and I'm pretty okay with it. And then they just go gut shot a deer. It um, happens, but it kind of is. It just bugs me because we talked about the crossbow thing, and the reason why I am so I feel so strongly about it at this point is because whenever it changed, I was working at Rural King, bought a crossbow, shot it 5 times in my backyard at 20 yards, and was in the woods that night, not having a clue what I was doing. Thought I did, been hunting, and it's completely wrong of people to do. I feel like that's probably why the regulation was there, was because you don't want just anybody going to Walmart, buying something, and maiming deer and leaving them. And the same probably applies with rifles. So I'm kind of curious, like, it's not a statistic that I think we'd be able to find, but I'm sure it's changed a lot. Like these things happening. Go practice more with your rifle or your crossbow before you go put a broadhead in a deer's stomach and then go home and then never go find it. Like the conservation side of it, just because it's loosened is not any less important. Which I know this wasn't a question. This is just a vent, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think the same can be said about shotguns. I mean, for example, I used to work with a guy who was new to deer hunting. I wasn't involved in this in any situation. I had just heard the story. Um, he went out a week, a night before gun season, and he bought a gun, and he bought a scope, or he bought a gun with a scope. He went out and hunted, and he saw deer. He shot at the deer multiple times, probably emptied the mag or whatever, and missed. He came back bitching and complaining that he had missed the deer. What I do wrong? Blah 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 blah. Well, did you take your rifle out or your shotgun, whatever it was, and practice and sight it in? He didn't even realize that when you buy a gun, you have to sight in the optic.
Thank
So,
God.
so when you get into thinking about felonies and basically any kind of restriction, whatever it might be, domestic violence, which would prevent you from buying a firearm, you've now opened that gate for anybody, literally anybody, to go out and buy a crossbow and do the exact same thing. Now, it is prevalent in gun hunting, but I think opening the crossbow thing probably did. I know that it increased traffic, um, because when I
Right.
bow hunted that coal mine area, there would usually be I would go there after school and after work and stuff, and there would be 4, 5, 6 guys signed in when they crossed the crossbow thing. Um, the sheet was full. The sign-in sheet was full. There's ground blinds everywhere. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't be encouraged to get outdoors. It's their property just as much as it is mine. It's public. But it is important to kind of, for the animal and, for conservation's sake, you should practice and know your weapon and know what you're shooting. And don't just go out there and just whack a deer in the ass. Because I've heard plenty of stories about that. People shooting deer in the ass and they had no idea where they're supposed to shoot the deer. Now, I have nothing against crossbows. I shot my biggest buck last year with a crossbow on the ground, but I think you should be proficient with it, and I think you should practice. And I think a lot of people miss that point. They think you can just pick it up and go out and you're a bow hunter. And I guess technically, if you go out with a crossbow and hunt with it, you're a bow hunter. But I don't know if I consider that, being a bow hunter.
Yeah, I completely support the decision that they've made. I just think, yeah, it opened up the door for the right people. My dad, being a poster child, could not shoot his bow anymore because of back problems. I can use a crossbow now, and but yeah, I was one of those people, admittedly, that was like, crossbow, easy. I shoot a shotgun and a rifle, and I jumped the deer when I walked in and didn't see anything else the whole rest of the day, and I never took it out again. It was like one and done, and yeah, I mean, at least I knew what I was getting myself into, and I am knowledgeable enough. Like, I wasn't gonna gut shot the deer, but I still don't think that I had enough experience with it to warrant myself being out there with it in said
Mm-hmm.
coal mine. Um, but
Yeah, and I think the price point is important too, right? So you can get on Amazon and buy a crossbow for $150. It's likely if you're gonna go. Let's. I bought a new a bear legit last year, and I'm probably 500 deep into it. So it's kind of an investment, Like if you're gonna buy a compound, you're kind of like you're invested, right? So you're gonna try your best to do everything right, but it's really easy for a guy to buy one for 150 dollars and just kind of go out there. And I don't
hope
know.
for the best.
I'm not totally convinced that you shouldn't maybe have to take some kind of. I mean, obviously you take hunter's safety or whatever, but I'm not convinced that you should be able to bow hunt maybe without maybe some kind of taking a test, at least telling you where to shoot in the vitals and how not to shoot your fingers off with a crossbow. Because I've heard stories of guys at the archery range. A guy actually shot his thumb off at a local at Bucks and Jake's using a crossbow because he didn't know what he was doing. So people think they're a lot safer than guns sometimes, but bows can be dangerous. There's a lot of people that fall out of their stands every year and get gored by their own arrows.
Yeah, let's. I had never considered that. Every time I think about falling out of my stand, I think about breaking my back. Never once
Yeah,
did I think about falling on my own arrow,
yeah,
which is ironic. But
hmm
I think the point I'm trying to make is just that it opened the door for a lot of people that were not focused on conservation, but were more focused on going to work Monday and like feeling good about yourself or telling your friends you know shot a deer, whatever. Before it was easier for people. It was 99% of people that were out there were focused on ethically killing, eating, and conservation just in general. Which um, it is funny because it was a Black Friday at Rural King for like a $279 bow. Bought it for $150 and was like, I've hunted forever, no big deal. I couldn't even tell you if it had a broadhead on it. I mean, I swear to you, it got to my head and was like, I've done this a million times. What's
Yeah.
different? Go shoot, try to, which I'm all about conservation, but that was just being a dumbass, frankly. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I think a lot of it is just lack of education, it's just so accessible to go in and buy something and then just take it out. You I'm not real big on the government forcing you to do certain things, but at the other hand of it, we're trying to conserve wildlife. There was a point when there was hardly no turkeys and deer because of bad conservation practices. I think it would be good to maybe, I don't know, they require you now to sell a harness with every tree stand that leaves a store, no matter what the brand. So maybe they should maybe include a booklet on a vital sign or something, because I've got to imagine that there's a lot of people that watch YouTube or their uncle's cousin's grandpa hunted once, and they just go out and they think you just shoot a deer, and they don't put together that there's actually more to it. You have to shoot the deer in the right location. You have to be able to track the deer. You have to be able to find the deer. Once you find the deer, you have to be able to skin the deer and gut the deer, cut the meat up. Like, it's not just buying a crossbow and pulling the trigger. There's just, I mean, killing the animal is probably the easiest part.
yeah,
Dragging it out and figuring out where to take it when it's warm outside, not letting the maggots and flies get to it is just, I don't know. Maybe they should put a disc or like, a QR code or something in every box.
yeah. And just to add to that, I'm especially guilty. I didn't know that they forced a harness on you, which is great. Whether people know it or not, it's for their own good. Whether
Mm-hmm.
they even use it, that's Darwinism, natural selection, whatever you want to call it. Good for them. Nature, let nature run its course.
Yeah.
But I know that every time, like it's all personal, and it depends on the person. Every time I buy a gun, and I fill out the paperwork, somewhere in there it says, "Do you have a lockable safe?" And I just stop and look up, and I'm like, "How about none of your fucking business?" And I'm sure that people are like, "Oh, I don't need a harness. I'm not gonna fall out." Just like I'm like, I don't, just
Yeah.
none of your business, man. Like I have
Right.
a on my front door, and that's plenty good. But it's all just a matter of who it is and everything. But um,
And
yeah,
I
it
mean, that's what
bothers
we're
me.
trying to do here, right? Is somebody catches the episode and they're like, maybe they're getting involved in hunting and maybe they're not a piece of shit, and maybe they are trying to learn, but they lack the knowledge, So maybe, they can catch, maybe they don't know that they need a broadhead. I mean, to us, it sounds silly, but at one point, I didn't know, at one point, and you went out with a crossbow and hunted without a broadhead. So, yeah, I mean, education, I think
Maybe.
is the biggest thing to kind of curve that.
Yeah, and we're dealing with a different generation of people. Us coming up, boomers going out. Perfect example is a seatbelt.
Hmm.
There's not every time you stop, walk out your door, and get in your car, you're like, "Am I gonna be in a fatal accident today?" Of course not. You never think of these things happening because you don't have control over it, and you know it, and you still don't wear your seatbelt. Guilty um, of that myself, but some people are like, I can go get in a tree stand. Everybody does it. You don't think that something bad is going to happen with your crossbow because it just seems so normal. But I think that our generation is taking heed better than the two generations ahead of us. I think we're all learning from past generations.
Yeah.
Um, and for example, anybody listening knows that there's somebody at their work or a friend of theirs that's really inspired to go out and take on the lifestyle, I guess you could say, but really don't know what they're doing. And we live in a society where we fake it until we make it.
Mm-hmm.
And um, squirrels, for example, like it doesn't matter in our workplace. If you ask any one of those people if they want to go squirrel hunting, they're gonna, uh-huh, I'll be there. Not, they don't even have to own a 22. They'll borrow somebody's and just uh, mess it up for themselves, and hopefully, potentially, not hopefully, potentially never try again. But it just goes back to how many times have you gone fishing and not caught anything? Hundreds of times. And
Every
that's what,
time for me.
not every, yeah, not a bunch of times, every time. And,
Mm-hmm.
every time if you are dedicated and you care about um, the animal and the process, you better yourself. And some people hopefully don't make the mistakes that we're talking about. Like, I guess that's why we're here, is to
Mm-hmm.
prevent from falling on their own arrow or shooting a deer and just going home, or better yet, cutting the antlers off of it and leaving it. Like, we're trying to better our generation, uh, educate, and I mean that's why I'm here and it all.
Yeah, I mean, I am willing to put my neck out there and help anybody that is willing to learn.
Back
However, I do believe that there are those out there that I'm going to try to word this the best way that I can. So I'm not trying to sound like an asshole or whatever, but I think there are those that think hunting is a game. They go out and they're gonna play
like
Daniel Boone.
hide and
Shout
seek.
out, shout out to my son Boone, who's named after Daniel Boone. But they think they're gonna go out and it's a game, but um, and maybe it's just me or certain individuals. I know there's a lot of people out there that feel like me. Is there's a real connection when you hunt and like seeing the whole picture. Getting getting the whole picture and understanding hunting and killing and taking life and skinning and saving the meat and like totally understanding the conservation aspect of it. Then you have those who are interested in it, but they just don't know. They don't know about conservation. They don't know about, they're just ignorant to it because they've never done it. They're willing to learn, but they just don't know, they've never done it. And then you have those who want to go, but they think it's a game. They think you go out and you just see if you can blow a squirrel's head off. And, that's it. And you leave the squirrel, you won the game, the squirrel lost. And that's kind of like it. They go home, they go out to eat,
Feel
they move on
really
with their life. And it's like nothing ever happened. It's like they went to a football or a soccer game. And that is the kind of stuff that pisses me off, is
Mhm.
those kind of folks.
Yeah. Um, damn. I wish I knew. I forgot what I was gonna say. I didn't want to interrupt you, but
That's okay.
you're right. There are people that treat it like a big ass game of hide and seek.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, I remember. And I'm not here to like prove myself. I just, maybe somebody will hear something. I'm trying to be thought provoking. I literally told you yesterday, like, just in regards to like being grateful for what God, Mother Nature, the earth, whatever you, because it could go apply to any of those things, however you feel about it. Being
Right.
grateful for what it's providing you, and understanding that what we buy at the store is different, and it's farmed. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, we are like farming wild animals, but it's just different. I told you I want to save every squirrel hide I have until I'm 60. Like I want to have just thousands of them in hopes that at some point in time I can utilize it and sew them all together and make a damn blanket or a hat or something. Like the drive to like want to make the life of the animal worth it.
Yeah.
Besides, like, yeah, eating it is essentially what we're there for. But like Native Americans, I hate to even reference it, but they used every single part that they could, and that's I'm like, I don't know if it's like a hoarding thing, like I want to hoard them, or I want to actually utilize them. It's somewhere in the middle, but um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I want to go back and touch on the conservation and kind of the playing the game kind of thing too. I think a lot of folks that go, like, I'll paint a scenario here. Let's just say my neighbor, we're I don't really talk to my neighbors. I don't really talk to anybody. I'm actually pretty introverted, believe it or not, being the host of a podcast. But besides the point, we're gonna pretend my neighbor is Bob. Bob
Johnson,
wants to go. Bob, yeah. Shout out to Bob Johnson, who
shout out
my
Bob.
my boss at work.
Oh,
So
Bojo.
we're gonna pretend that Bob wants to go hunting, my neighbor, and he comes with me, he goes hunting, and he shoots the animal, and he's just like can't find it, or he just like chucks it in a ditch whenever he leaves. He goes with me, he puts him in his truck. He's like, I don't want to clean these things, I don't even, whatever. He chucks him in a ditch. I think a lot of people that play around with hunting and don't really understand the conservation and the whole cycle of it. Um, I think for some reason it never clicks in their brain that that is a living thing, and that it is spent. There's different life cycles of animals, but we'll just say 2 years. I'm not sure the life of a squirrel, but let's pretend it's 2 or 3 years. They don't understand that that squirrel was born in the wild with no human interaction, or it hasn't been tainted by anybody. It has survived cold ass winters that you would die if you slept on your porch in the wilderness, in the woods. It has found its own food. It has found its own and built its own shelter, and then you kill it and just chuck it in a ditch. I mean, just like the
Yeah,
whole thought of that, even just being a squirrel, just makes me want to strangle somebody.
yeah. You're right. What they like,
There's just so much more to it.
they are so superior to us. It is unreal. Like,
Mm-hmm.
which I think we all like to practice and think that we'd be able to make it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now, I'd be fine, but I guarantee you, yeah, on the 11th day, I'm like, I'm dying. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
make it, boys. Like, so it is pretty amazing. Like an infant,
Yeah.
deer, squirrel, rabbit, frog, like they go through it. We don't have predators, and there are things that want to eat everything. Like I guess we are predators, but it's a little bit different. We
I
cheat.
like to I like to kind of paint this picture. When you think about, just imagine the listeners, and Jared, you too. When you think about going out, it's late December. You haven't killed a deer, so you want to go out. It's cold as fuck. The wind's blowing 30 miles an hour. It's snowing. You're bundled up and look like the Michelin Man. You hunt the last 2 hours before the sun sets, and you're literally froze to death. When you get back to your truck, you can't hardly start your vehicle because you were so cold. You
Mm-hmm.
are going to go home and take a shower, and you're going to get warm. Those deer living in that have no option,
Yeah.
and they survive it year after year. I mean, I don't
Which
know, kind of think they're like a little more superior to us. Yeah, I mean, if they had a gun, I think they might
yeah,
be successful. You know what I mean?
come knocking. Yeah. Oh, and it is such a shame that they never get to experience that feeling of your heater kicking on and your boots off in your truck. It's such a good feeling. Oh my gosh, I can't. I don't like you said the drive there is like the anxiety and the angst to like go make things suck for you physically is
Yeah.
so exciting. And then even if you don't shoot anything, I don't care. I've hunted so many times and been skunked fishing, but that feeling of kicking off your boots and stepping into your truck and that heater, oh man, what a
It's
feeling.
almost as good as being successful, knowing that you are not going to freeze to death.
And you're leaving with the drive to come back because you
Mhm.
got skunked feels amazing. And you're just so proud of yourself for doing nothing. I'm like, I'm so hyped up when I get in the truck. I'm like, yeah, I just did nothing and I'm going to come back and do nothing tomorrow. And I cannot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, when you think about it, unless you really dive deep into it, you just think you're kind of hunting. But I do think that I think, and I won't say for everybody, I'm going to break it down into hunters, us as kind of like a subculture. I think there's something embedded in our brains that kind of draws us to that. It makes us feel old school or natural, how our ancestors were. It's just like a natural thing. I think it I don't know if it boosts serotonin or whatever in your brain, but it's just like
Mhm.
something about it is it's not normal in today's society, but it's like I think it's normal even through evolution and everything. It's just there in your brain that you feel like it's something that you need to do. I mean, I feel that way. Like I feel like it's something I have to do. Even if I don't want to go hunting, I still feel like it's like something that I don't know. I have like this instinct to want to do it. I'd be interested to know if like other people feel that way too. Maybe I'm just a weirdo, but
Which I can kind of like, I understand what you were just saying. How it feels differently for us, like compared to other people. Us mowing the grass, it's like it's easy. Like we're no stranger to hard work and sweat and dirty.
hmm
Whereas like a friend of mine that's a lawyer, whenever he has to mow the grass, it is like you and me going sub zero temperatures to hunt all day. Like it's that it then they get the enjoyment without having to do that. So like I feel like everybody still has that drive and the proud moment of like the struggle and then the relief. It just some like for some of us we have to go a little bit further to get that little drip of serotonin in the brain.
Yeah, I think it's similar to. I won't say that it's obviously your adrenaline rushes whenever you shoot a deer, a squirrel, or whatever it might be. I think it's similar to that, but different in a way as your adrenaline's not pumping, but um, you know, it's the addiction to. Well, I would say that mine's an addiction to suffering, as bad as that sounds. Like if I go hunting and it's
Yeah.
easy and it's not cold and miserable and I go out and it's 60 degrees and I walk over there and just shoot a deer. I am not I walk a field and I shoot a booner, a wall hanger, a record book deer in 60-degree weather. I will tell you, if I shoot a spike in miserable conditions where I'm froze to death, I'm going to be a lot happier about that deer. And
Yeah.
I think it's the experience. I think if it's too easy, it's just, um, I don't
Frankly,
know.
we wouldn't know what it would feel like to make it easy. So I
Yeah.
can imagine what you mean though.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head with that. Some people we just have to make it harder on ourselves. It might feel really good to just walk in the woods, 65 degrees, smoke a deer, drag it out, and go eat. Like
Right.
I imagine my impulse is to be like, that must be nice, but I
Yeah.
don't. It probably really isn't. It's just
I think maybe once, twice it would be nice, but I think if you went every time
yeah.
and that was the case, I think you would be turned off by it. I think you would get bored. I think you wouldn't feel the connection with nature. I know you wouldn't feel a connection with nature because you're not spending enough time out there. You're not seeing the possums and the squirrels and the rabbits and the coyotes. You're not really getting the whole picture. You're kind of just going in and robbing. Essentially, you're going in and robbing nature's bank and cutting
Mhm.
out instead of, kind of hanging out for the whole robbery.
And not to sound like an absolute burnout, but those days that you go in and you see nothing, you're like, you spend the entire day without that train of thought in your head. You can hear the trees and the squirrels and the nuts and the leaves are so deafening. Like they're so loud to you and it shuts off everything on the inside. And if anybody were to believe that the world is like one giant living organism, like going out there and listening to what like the earth was supposed to sound like is enough to make it worth it. I mean, everybody wants to drag a deer out, but at the same time, it goes along with the struggle. Just going and listening to like what the earth has to tell you that day is um, part like half the fun of it.
Yeah,
Because frankly,
I think
freezing is not fun.
I think a lot of people too. There's a lot of those who think they experienced, and this is more broad, but there's people that go to parks and there's people that go hiking on, a nature conservation trail at some 40-acre place and they think they're in nature. But like
Big old red back.
until until you get out into nature away from stoplights and traffic and power plants, I would I would bet money that there's a lot of people out there that think they've experienced nature, but they never actually have. Because going to a nature park is a conservation area like Wesselman's Park, for example. It's good. It's for conservation. I get it. You take kids there and stuff, like you walk around, whatever. But like to go there and think that you're experiencing nature, um, I think it's foolish. You're not really experiencing. It's tainted by wooden plank boardwalks. I think hunting gives people the access, and maybe more so on public land, but I'm just talking generally to kind of be nomadic and make their way wherever they want in the woods and get as far away as they can and really experience what the world is like kind of pre 150 200 year, back when you had to kill shit to actually survive. I think a lot of people miss that, and maybe that would turn people on to wanting to go hunt, is just being able to kind of experience the serenity, of being in far backwoods country nature.
The loneliness. Yeah,
Yeah, the loneliness.
oh, all the credit to the federal government and the state for trying. I mean,
Yeah,
Wesselman's, for example, like your state, oh, hell of a try. I mean, I
yeah.
commend you, but no. And I want to like, it takes a lot of, it's selfish for me to be like, the more people that go there, the better it is for me. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you and I were the last two people on the planet, we would have some great hunts. Like we would have some really good hunts going on. But I mean, thank God we're not using the old wagon wheel, anymore. So I do appreciate a good shower. Um,
Yeah.
Eat in my truck.
I do too. I appreciate a good shower and good air condition.
Yeah.
Driving to the woods, as we're going to be doing this weekend. We're going to do a little drive. It's about 2 hours from my house, but we're going to drive to some a big piece of public land and hunt. But I don't really want to take a wagon and a horse 2 hours with no air conditioning in the middle of August. So I'm thankful for that. But at the same time, I want to park my vehicle and and sweat to death and be miserable and get attacked by mosquitoes. Why? I don't know. It's miserable, but it makes me feel alive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. If somebody pulled up out front with a wagon, I had to call into work tomorrow. Go. I don't care if it takes me 3 days to get there. I would love it still. Granted, it's not snowing and there aren't like bobcats trying to eat us, but yeah, that's an interesting thought we just had, where that just went. But going back to the conservation, poachers, that sort of thing. Growing up, I can't tell you like the first 5 years that I was probably old enough to go hunt. My dad would we would go, no gun, no tree stand, like dress up, and we would just walk and scout and be quiet. It was like practice, and every time I'm like, why are we not just blowing the shit out of everything that we see? And the whole
Mm-hmm.
time he'd be grumbling about conservation and poachers and telling me stories of people and things he's seen. And all it was like going to hunting college for me. And one of those things that, I wasn't able to put it all together because I didn't understand. I just heard old dad grumbling through the woods talking to me about pieces of shit. But one of the things that I heard every single time was gut piles. Now, it was understood whenever he gave me a 60-pound Summit climber and a 9-pound shotgun as an 11-year-old and 14 layers of clothes. And he was like, you're going to walk, I already knew where, but uh, it was understood that there was a rope in my backpack and I was to tie the deer's front legs up and I was going to drag it as far as I needed to drag it to get it back. And it never occurred to me until I was older that, and no offense to you, that's why I'm asking, is it like a normal thing to shoot your deer, find it, and gut it and leave it there, leave a gut pile? Because I was never given, I was like, he was like, I don't care if it takes 3 days, you're pulling the deer out, guts and all. And like, so I've been thinking about it recently, like, is it, of course, we were on private land. We were on like 100 acres and of somebody, one of his friends. So like there was a respect thing. So it might be different in public properties, but I know that gut piles, it's burned in my mind from hearing him say it. And he's just like, nothing pissed my dad off more than a gut pile. And I was like, it's like when you're a kid, you think that you're going to catch on fire because of how many times they told you to stop, drop, and roll. I have yet to see a gut pile. So, like, I don't even know about it. But you'd think
So
you've seen more by now.
So we'll go real deep into this, and there's a spectrum. There's a right side, a left side, and somewhere in the middle. And I would say that I fall somewhere in the middle, which is generally about everything in life. I fall somewhere in the middle. Um, so I've heard
Yeah, I believe.
gut piles scare deer, gut piles, whatever, everything that basically you explained. I've also heard gut piles don't matter. Um, they don't scare deer. They smell like deer. Blah blah blah. I'm somewhere in the middle with this. I do my best to for example, let's say I shot a deer with a shotgun and it fell over and died right where I shot it, 5 yards from my stand. I'm a mile away from my truck. Guts weigh a lot. They're heavy. You know, I don't really want to drag it by myself at 7 p.m. whenever I get down from the stand, get all my gear packed up. It's late. I don't really want to drag a deer a mile by myself full of guts. Um, However, I don't really want to put things that are not natural and in place in front of my tree stand either, because you could throw a Dixie cup out, for example, in front of your tree stand, and that's going to be the first thing a deer picks up. It's like if somebody walks into your bedroom and puts an apple pie on your bed, you're going to notice it.
Oh,
Whatever item is out of place, it doesn't matter what it is.
right.
So if I'm in that situation where I'm going to have to walk a far distance, it's pretty likely that I'm going to go 200 or 300 yards and then gut it. If for some reason I can't drag it a little bit of ways and gut it, um, and I have to gut it right there, I would say it's depending on the situation of when you shot the deer. We'll play on, you shot the deer, it had other deer with it, and you gutted it right there. I think you're probably not going to kill deer there the next day because they're a little bit stunted from seeing Lucy or Bucky get shot. I don't think leaving the gut pile is going to mess with them in that sense, but I think if there wasn't any deer with it and you shot it and you gutted it there, I think you'd be okay to hunt it for a day or two, until it starts getting maggots and starts to stink and smell like death. And I'm sure you've smelled that,
Oh yeah.
through hunting and stuff. I think the smell of that gut pile as it ages and ripens and rots, I think they do pick up on that. But initially, a day or two, it's cold outside and you've got one in the wintertime. It doesn't ever really stink. It freezes and the coyotes and stuff eat it before then. But
Which
if
is
I had to do it by my stand, I'd probably attempt to, um, depending on where I'm at, I might try to, dig a hole with my boot and bury it with grass. Like, maybe not leave it so obvious. I think it's situational, honestly. I think it's situational. I think you try to avoid it if you can. If you can't avoid it, I think you hunt a different spot, or it depends on how many deer are with it. But I will tell you, let's see, 2 years ago, I shot a doe opening morning of the Indiana reduction. I watched a doe run maybe 20 yards and fall and die. There was other deer with that deer, but I didn't have any other tags to shoot it. So they're just hanging around and they never did leave. Eventually they did leave. They walked around. It was the weirdest thing I ever saw. They basically got in a line, went down the trail, cut over to the deer. They all walked by that deer and looked at it like they were at the showing of a funeral. They crossed the path and they all left. None of them blowed. None of them ran. It was the strangest thing, but you would think, from hearing gut pile stories and like, don't leave the tail, or don't quarter it up there, you would think that those deer would register that deer is dead and that there's danger. But I'm not convinced that that's always the case.
Yeah, they more than likely had no idea why or how it died. So that does uh, prove a decent point. Like that answers my question for the most part, because animals do die every day. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not like they're like the coroner, like, oh my gosh, Sally got shot with a
Right.
243. I can see it clear as day. Um, but so I answered my own question while you're talking. You answered my question essentially. A, um, not off topic, but not to my point. We had a trash can in our driveway that, as a kid growing up, like my dad would gut and skin the deer in the driveway and put it in a trash can, like with a black trash bag. And I don't know what he ever did with it. I'm assuming he put it in the city trash can eventually. But like, yeah, it that thing would get ripe as
Yeah.
hell. Like the
Mm-hmm.
next day, like it would freeze at night. Then I just remember lifting that trash can up as a kid and just seeing a mess in there, and I was like, oh, I didn't think nothing weird of it. I was just like, ooh, that's gross. But that goes to show he really never did that, and I think it's because he kept that private land sacred to, like, he no, not going to give himself the benefit of the doubt on anything. Going to make sure this stays right, not right, but prime. Um, and also for anybody that's listening, what I just the question that I just asked, I know, while I was sitting here listening, it is burning up some people's asses to hear me say that. or like, just itching to be like, oh my gosh, that's the stupidest question. To paint a picture, in southern Indiana, we're hunting majority of the time cornfields and bean fields and clearings. And we're shooting 75, 50, 100 yards on a clearing. So it's kind of different. Like we have more option. Now, there's somebody in Utah right now listening to this that's like, you think I'm going to drag my deer 9 miles up and down they're just hunting rolling hills and not really thick woods, but stalking just hundreds and thousands of acres of land. Of course, that's probably not the smartest thing. Gut your deer because you can be 30 miles away hunting again the next day. We don't necessarily have that luxury. What we do have the luxury of is that 8 foot path between the woods and the corn and just flat ground. We're just now where we go this weekend. It is not so wide like I imagine in Utah or something like that, but it is like steep rock faces, and the odds of you zero. There's not a chance in hell the two of us will be able to drag a full grown deer, not gutted, out of that place. It is rough. Um, so I guess that answered my question for me. It's a very specific to where you're hunting, the demographic, the land, geography, like all of it. Um, if you gut your deer in the middle of Utah, you're not a piece of shit. If you gut your deer under your tree stand 90 feet from your truck,
Yeah.
you're kind of maybe you're just a dumbass. Maybe it's not wrong, but maybe you know something that we don't know. So
Yeah, and I think, when it comes to being situational or geographical too, is there's areas, for example, you will know, but others won't. Posey County, an area that I hunted last year, I shot a deer there and gutted it and went back to hunt a day or two later, and the gut pile was non-existent because there's so many coyotes out there and so many possums, and it's a rural area where there's lots of animals out there to eat all of this stuff. There's crows. Now, if you're hunting, your neighbor Janice's backyard that she's got a little 2 acres on, and you do that, it's likely that it's not full of coyotes, and it's likely it's not full of possums. You hunt that early bow season, that thing's probably going to be there for a while. So, pick and choose your battles. Don't make it harder on yourself, but also if you do got to do it, try your best to kind of cover it up or not leave it at the bottom of your stand if you don't have to. But if it's not an option, I mean, you shoot the deer, you got to gut it, you got to get it out. Sometimes, hunting the next day or whatever kind of just goes out the window.
And like you said, you can stretch the theory into you're almost doing a disservice to the environment by not gutting it. Here in southern Indiana, Hoosier, the turkey vultures around here will swoop down and take a cheeseburger out of your hand. Like they're hungry, and there's lots of them. So and Hoosier has a ton of coyotes too. And I imagine, well, almost 100% of what turkey vultures eat is dead already. They're not actually killing deer. So that's kind of it's just another aspect of conservation, I guess. But
that's just the cycle of life.
I guess it comes down to just use your best judgment.
Yeah.
But it's very situational. So you're gonna hunt September, right? Reduction.
September 4th. September 4th, I'll head to Kentucky, but the Indiana reduction starts September 15th. So I'll kind of float back and forth until regular season comes in October 1st for us.
Regular season being still archery.
Correct. Yes.
So archery to archery, and then we get 3 weeks in November in Indiana.
Hmm.
What things are you doing? You kind of have a leg up by the time you get to your rifle because you've been watching. You've already spent 2 months out there,
Yeah.
essentially just scouting, killing or not. But what do you feel like it obviously it has to make it easier, right? When you get to gun season, you're like you already have a really good idea of like where they're at, bedding, all of that. Is there like what changes about your routine specifically on your way aside from camouflage
Yeah,
versus a
so
combination?
I think this is something people miss a lot, that strictly gun hunt, and we call those the Orange Army, which I'm a part of, but I'm only I'm a reservist, I'm not a full blown Orange Army guy because I do bow hunt.
Just real reserves.
But I think a lot of people um, miss. Okay, so I go in the woods to bow hunt. Obviously, I scout, but I haven't been in the woods for a little. There's guys that scout every week that deer hunt. They scout all through the season, the winter, everything. But I think being a bow hunter, I'm in the woods more, and I can notice how the deer transition throughout the year. When you go in and you gun hunt, most gun hunters, at least around here, I live very close to Rural King, that Jared referenced earlier, which is a farm store. Um,
Oh, brother.
if you go to Rural King the night or the weekend before gun season, they're sold out of tree stands, and everybody in line is buying one.
So
None of
concerning.
those guys or most of those guys have been in the woods yet. They're gonna build that thing in their garage, go out to the woods and set it up. The thing about deer is deer change their routes and change what they're doing constantly. I mean, I'm talking probably I generally say a 2 week window. So being a bow hunter, I kind of watch the woods transition from deer coming up, getting out of bed very close to dark and going to cornfields early in September, and it fades off kind of by October, second week or so. They switch their patterns when the fields get cut, when the rut starts to kick in. I watch all of that as I'm bow hunting. I watch the whole cycle of everything. I watch rubs and scrapes start to show up. I begin to maybe not pattern the deer, but understand the way that they're moving and the way that they've changed this and why are they not coming to this field anymore and all this stuff. I kind of see the whole picture as to where people who gun hunt only, and I'm not saying everybody, maybe there's ones out there that scout a shit ton for gun season, but those guys they don't get the experience or the knowledge that bow hunters get because they're not in the woods as much. So I guess for me it's moving to hot sign whenever the deer move. A lot of gun hunters, and I guess bow hunters too, and I'm guilty of it, is they get set in their ways. They put a stand up. It's fucking hot. They don't want to move it. They don't want to take it down. It feels good in the tree. It's the best stand they've ever sat in. But guess what? If there's no deer there, you're not going to kill a deer. So I mean, for me, it's following the sign. Those 2 months give me the chance to follow the deer, find the new sign, watch as sign fades out, and you can watch sign go from being really hot to being nothing. And I think that's it. I think it's just experience and spending time in the woods. I get to experience and spend my time in the woods scouting deer hunting as opposed to those who just they have to scout a day before gun season comes in. Maybe they get lucky and get on some hot sign, but I don't think they get the full picture. I think they only see, an eighth of the picture. They don't understand the whole metrics or the whole system of how the deer move.
And I'm guilty myself, not necessarily what you're saying, but in regards to the picture, because the conversation that we're having is all about seeing the bigger picture of this whole thing to have a greater understanding. And it never occurred to me that those people exist. You know, when you told me that, I'm like, well, duh. I just told you that about rifles and crossbows, but I never really put two and two together, one and one together. I don't know, in retrospect, if my dad was like, just that was like how that was the time that he wanted to spend with me. It was like a way. I never got the birds and the bees, but I got the birds and the bees of like poaching and conservation.
Right.
And we did that year around, all for 3 weeks in November. I mean, like we were there every other weekend looking for like movement and stuff. So like to me, it's super normal to be out there like, yeah, hiking.
Yeah, watch the landscape kind of shift and change throughout the seasons, and like the rut or whatever.
Hmm. Uh, so that's kind of interesting. And even then, spending, I mean, 365 days of the year out there and still getting skunked like over and over. Those people that just get, do what you just described are so lucky to have killed a deer, because I try harder than most and it still doesn't work out. And I'm just as tickled as can be, like walking out with nothing and spending so much time trying and failing repeatedly. Um, so that's kind of an interesting like part aspect of it. But
Yeah,
as
I can.
far as um,
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
like I hate to dive into it because this is like I realize now this is like a three-part question, and
Let's dive into it. Let's do it.
okay. So when I said routine, I don't just mean I mean like physically. What do you do differently as you're leaving the woods, preparing for the next morning, coming back? It, in a difference, and when I ask that, there's
Do I change my methods as far as like climbing down and getting out and like kind of my tactics
I mean
per
like
se?
yeah, because I think that through the year things don't change. You're always looking for beds,
Yeah.
grub, um, and there's two obvious things that I just want to point out in case somebody's not thought this far. And this is
Hmm.
like stuff that I can't even dive that far into. The foliage this weekend compared to December 20th. Uh, just stark contrast. Could not be more different. And like you said before, the camouflage that you're wearing, I mean, if we all hypothetically would have a different outfit for every month of the year, just to match perfectly, not as important. Um,
Maybe if we hit the lottery, that could happen.
yeah, we pew
Yeah.
gone. But yeah, the hunting's just not that good around here for me to stay after I hit the lottery, frankly. But so that's like an obvious thing. Some people might have thought about it, some people might not have. And the other part of the routine that I want to point out to whoever's listening is um, the velvet, the rut, after the rut. Like those are things that change from bow to rifle, like um, October 1st or September 10th compared to November 21st. The deer are going to be after different things, looking for different things, acting differently. And something that I always did in gun season, like I told you, pour tinks in a film canister on some cotton balls, set it
Hmm.
at the bottom of my tree, and hope that they smell that, which I was just told to do it by my dad. And he's the god of hunting. Like you don't ever doubt
Yeah.
the man. But I don't know. It was doe estrogen, assuming that would work in the rut, right? Like that would be the purpose of finding
R-
bucks. You're gonna smell out
right,
doe,
they're after a doe. Yeah.
which is my question partially. Gun season, November 21st to 29th, or 17 to 29, whatever it is, off the top of my head, that is that time period. Should people be focused on, is that the rut specifically? So that's what I mean by routine, and what you're looking for is, what are the deer doing in the middle of November compared to the beginning of September, in regards to like your what you are, how are you
So
acting,
so you want to know how I play chess with these deer depending on the time of year.
right? And like,
Okay.
what time of year would that be
Okay.
specifically?
So we'll start with September. I'm mainly focusing on, and stop me if I'm not answering this correctly. I'm mainly focusing on food and bedding. At that point in the time of the year, these deer are living like they were all summer. They really, I, I don't mean this to sound in a bad way, but they don't really have a purpose at that point. They're eating and they're sleeping and they're drinking water. They're kind of on spring break, you know. They're eating, they're sleeping, they're eating, they're drinking, they're sleeping. They don't have, and we're talking does and bucks, but like bucks at that point, they're not after does. They don't care about it. Generally, they're in bachelor groups. They're hanging out with other bucks. There's two, three, four of them hanging out together. The big
Mhm.
bucks, they're hiding out, maybe up on a ridge with the does and the smaller bucks below them. So when Jared walks up the ridge, he busts those does out, which alerts that buck to get away. As the woods transitions, October, the deer transition to go into breeding season. Their levels go up, their testosterone levels go up, which cause them, to start chasing does. They start
Active.
doing they start going outside of the norm. Instead of just feeding and bedding, they're also taking extra routes to see what kind of girlfriend they can find. So they shift, they get different. That's why the woods changes. That's why new trails show up. So I guess going back in September and me focusing on food and bedding, I mean, I'm trying to get as close as I can to a bed because those deer are not usually, and this is general, but mostly those deer aren't really getting up, and specifically the big bucks, they're not getting up in enough time for you to hang out on a field and shoot it. Now, if you've got private land in Kansas, maybe, but like around here, those deer are not getting up until like the last 10 minutes of shooting light. So you need to be as close to that bed as you possibly can without scaring the deer. By close to the bed, I mean 75 to 100 yards. A lot of people make the mistake of the deer are bedded at point A, which might be 300 or 400 yards off the field. They set up on the field. They wait for the deer. The deer shows up. As you know, you can see a deer in dark with moonlight. The deer shows up and he's under your stand or he's 20, 30 yards away. It's now dark. And guess who's stuck in the tree stand on the field?
Guilty.
You flick on your light, which I'm very, very much against. Well, let's just say you don't flick on your light. And you walk down your sticks and you slip and your boot squeaks. You blow those deer, every single deer off of that field because they know where the sound's coming from. You've blown that field out. It's likely that the does and the young bucks are going to come back, but the big 5, 6 year old deer, you might as well forget it. I mean, it's done. So I think for my strategy that early season is to kind of get as close to the beds as I can without spooking them. And the hardest thing at that time of year is getting out of the woods without spooking deer.
Right.
It's the hardest thing to do. Now going into October, you'll get a lot of deer that a lot of people focus around here. They're going to be focusing on after the crops are out, the deer are moving more to the woods. They've got to eat, right? It's still food, water, bedding, and at this point, sex, breeding. They're going to focus a lot more on fruit bearing trees, whether it be persimmons, whether it be acorns, which a lot of people hunt acorn flats. At this point, the deer do come and feed. But from my experience, the deer don't hang around and mill on an acorn flat until dark. From my experience, now there may be people that experience that a lot, but at that point in time in the year, I'm not so worried about blowing a deer out and having to get out of the stand and not stay there till 11 p.m. because deer will hang in a field all night. They don't usually. What I've noticed is they come through, they pick the tree and they move on. So, you either shoot the deer or you wait till it moves on. And then going into November.
Can I?
Yeah, I'll stop you.
So in September, moving into October, you're not playing so much of a mind game, but a physical. You're looking for beds, food, shit, which they're in velvet in September, and they're
right
rubbing, right?
Well, Kentucky starts September 3rd, and most of the deer there will be still in velvet, but as you get to the end of September, October-ish, most of it's shed or almost completely shed. That's why you don't see a whole lot killed in Indiana with velvet, because you're about 2 or 3 weeks off. It doesn't take a whole lot of time for them to rub off, but yeah, by that point they're usually done.
So it really is like early bow season is an instinctual thing, like using your eyes and your best judgment and trying to be smart about it.
It is, but it's also, all year round, it's important to find beds and food. Those deer are always going to sleep and they're always going to feed. I think it's a little, it's easier to pattern deer. I'll say pattern generally too, because they're wild animals, obviously, but you notice that deer come to this same spot if you put a trail camera out at 5:30 p.m. every day to this field. It's easier during September. Bedding, food, bedding, food. When you get into October and stuff starts to shift, when you have a cornfield that's 25 acres big, they don't worry about finding new food. In October, once the white oaks drop on that tree, that acorn flat, and they eat them all, they're gone. The deer move. They don't move in a cornfield. There's enough for them to eat inevitably, for years on end.
Right.
So I guess, yeah, as you transition into fall, you're more or less chasing food.
And just to anybody that just heard you say that about spooking the deer at night, if anybody is even the least bit skeptical, Google search trail camera and tell me how many pictures you see in the day compared to at night, because 90% of those pictures are in the middle of the night and they're all eating, compared to like the pictures that are just happen to catch a deer walk by and it's just trotting along. I feel like, and I was always told on top of that that they burn a whole lot more calories during the day in the sun when it's hot. So they move at night in order to conserve the energy so that they can go eat and come back, bed, and burn as little amount of calories as they can. And it's kind of like the problem with hunting when it's 60 degrees. I feel like it's harder. But this is just word of mouth, things that I've heard over the years. But
yeah, there's so many variables in it too. Like, do you have good food sources to hunt? Are you hunting an apple orchard that nobody else hunts? Like, obviously that's going to be easier than hunting a piece of public with no cornfields, with rolling hills. So yeah, for me, I'll tell you, I've never shot a velvet buck. I've got a lot of them on camera, and I've had a lot of close encounters, but it's all hard. I think my favorite time of the year is probably the rut. It's the easiest, and that's probably not why it's my favorite. Is because it's has the most action. A lot of early season is you go in, you know that basically like you're waiting until the last 30 minutes of light are going to be. It's either your time to shine or not. During the rut, during the fall, it can happen at 12 p.m. It can happen at 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 5 p.m. It can happen early in the morning. So I guess I like the fall. I think it's a little more mysterious, I guess.
Unpredictable.
Yeah.
In regards to the routine, the moral of my question, like what I'm getting at is I've only gun hunted and I'm going to start bow hunting and I'm going to follow the steps and like master and apprentice, and I'll find out what's different just from watching and learning. But in my mind, without bow hunting ever, just walking, leaving your house at 1 in the morning and grabbing the bow. And then when it's gun season, you walk out the door 1 in the morning with your gun. And aside from the rut and the foliage and how you're hunting, what is different, like equipment wise,
Okay.
or timing, or
Okay. I think I can. I think I understand kind of the deeper depth of what you want to dive into. So I think to start off, let's compare the two. I hate to call them weapons, but well, let's
tool?
let's go with tools. We'll start with a bow and a gun. If you're going to gun hunt a field, let's say you're going to gun hunt a field, where are you going to set up at on an open field?
Literally, are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm literally asking you.
Yeah. Probably 10 yards into the woods on the furthest point from traffic, society, where they would see. So, like what I did whenever I was hunting that private property, we'd pull into the edge of the woods, and there'd be like 50 yards of woods, and then 100 by 100 cornfield, a tree line, another 100 by 100 cornfield. Now I would go to the back right hand corner and put my tree stand like 10 yards into the woods with a clear view of the field, like back far enough so I can see like both corners, but also not just, plumb right on the edge of the woods. I would back into it a little bit and put my tree stand up there in
So
order.
I'm going to have you answer your own question here, probably.
There.
What is it that you are imagining happening in this situation? Like, where do you imagine yourself shooting this deer
Well, so
with we'll say a rifle, so you have pretty good distance?
the way that I was set up before, the field in front of me, woods to my back, more than likely they can't see me because I'm in front of a tree. They would be coming from behind me to the field, and hypothetically I'm not moving. So like a lot of the time I would hear footsteps for a half an hour before I'd see anything. And I would just be frozen and hope that
Now,
when you get 10 yards out, 20 yards, they'd be in the field at the edge to eat, and I would smoke them.
so you're wanting to smoke them once they get to the food, right? You want them to come from behind you, pass you, get to the corn bean field, whatever it might be, and then shoot them.
Yeah, I never envisioned them coming in my direction. I always envisioned them facing the same way that I am and walking from behind me.
Now, I'm gonna say this kind of like a dick, but I'm gonna make a point here. You should never really envision how the deer are gonna come. You should almost know how the deer are gonna come because deer most of the time are not where you think they're gonna be or where you want them to be. You should be following the sign to be able to tell that they're coming from that direction. Now, you sitting there for 30 minutes and hearing deer walk from behind you tells me you should be a hell of a lot closer to the beds. You're way too far, taking way too much time for the deer to get to you, burning daylight, essentially getting dark by the time they get to the field. So I think definitely you're going to approach it different with a gun because, you know, you're going to be able to shoot further. When you bow hunt, you definitely take longer to get set up. You're going to require maybe multiple tow ropes to get your gun up or get your bow up and your camera gear and your backpack and all that stuff. But you've also, from my experience, it takes longer for me to set up with a bow than it does a gun. I can pretty much hang from my toenails and shoot a deer from a tree, but everything has to be perfect when I bow hunt. I number one, I have to have clear shooting lanes. So if you're a run and gun hunter, you better make sure you give yourself enough time because you're not going up in a ladder stand. You better make sure you give yourself enough time to when you get to an area, you have the time and the ability to find the right tree to get in, number one, so you can make a shot. It's not going to be so much concerning with a gun because sure, you can blast through a couple of leaves and a twig with a 30-06. Are you going to do that with a Muzzy 3 blade? Yeah. Is it going to screw your arrow up? Yeah. So I guess as far as like going in, I would say you need to spend more time archery than you do gun, just for the simple fact of everything has to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I guess could you repeat the question too? Because there was something else I wanted to touch on, but I've kind of lost that in my mind.
Well, yeah, just routine, like the part of hunting that we all do in preparation. And I don't even really know, like I'm not looking for like I don't know what I'm looking for when I say that.
Yeah,
But the obvious things you're like, oh, I do not. So to
I
help for like
I think you need to be more on your feet when you bow hunt. You need to,
your move,
and I don't mean that literally, but I mean that like you need
right?
to be more sharper and thinking. You almost always need to be thinking 5 steps ahead. So imagine a scenario of you um, walking in the woods with a rifle and you see a deer at 50 yards. Boom, it's probably dead. Now, if you do that during bow season, what are the odds of you shooting a deer at 50 yards in a dense woods?
So
So
there's
I think you need to always be kind of one step ahead of kind of like what the plan's going to be. It's a lot easier to just walk in the woods and shoot a deer with a gun than it is with a bow.
right, and I knew beds and deer shit like 100 yards behind me. Like I knew we spent so much time in there that I'm under the assumption that A, I can turn around with this gun and shoot literally any direction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I was able to like get that far, and B, I'm between them and food, and
Mm-hmm.
there was essentially no nearer food around. So like I knew that if they were in those beds, they were coming in my direction, and I was um, just yeah giving myself the benefit of the doubt and thinking that I was doing the right thing. Now, what you're telling me is like you can't. You got to try harder. Essentially, there's more homework involved, and
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely more homework involved. And I think the simple answer is a lot. And I don't mean this as like you physically like getting hurt, but like a lot more can go wrong a lot faster when you throw a bow into the equation versus a rifle.
Right. Which that's also like tree stand. It's going to be potentially in a different place, which I was hunting the field, and the three deer I saw that first year, one was at the opposite corner of me coming from the highway, which is not what I thought was going to happen. And the two does that ran past me were like coming from the other nearest road. So like they were I should have probably done like thought further into it, but I didn't. I just thought that all three of those were like just crazy. I was going to find a deer that was going to eat at the crack of dawn or when the sun was going down, and it was just going to be simple.
Now,
Um,
I'm going to give a little secret away here, but I'm not giving my spots away, so we might be okay. I will tell you, I have shot, and this is fully legal and fully safe. I have shot more deer 20 to 50 yards from the interstate and the highway than I have in the rural country, nobody around woods. And I think, I heard you say I wanted to get as far away from the road as I could. And a lot of times that's the case when you're parking on that side of the road. But if you're parking at A, and then there's a woods, and on the other side, there's an interstate, which is not really accessible other than pulling off on the side of the highway or walking back there. People tend to want to get somewhere in the middle. So
mhm.
they end up as far away from each road as possible.
Right.
Deer get hit a lot on the highway here. And it's because they use those roads just like deer and animals use streams, and like people 200 years ago used water to navigate. They use that stuff to navigate. So, I mean, I don't know if this really answers the question as transitioning through the seasons, but um, I have found to not overlook. If you go hunt next to a highway, you'll notice there's often a fence, some kind of little dingy fence or barrier that they have to put up. It's
Right.
required by the city or the state. I've noticed on the thick wood side, so like not the highway side of the fence, the deer always travel that fence. So that's something that I look for, along with beds and food. I look for major travel routes that are far away from people. And be honest with you, not a lot of people go back to that fence because they think it's too close to the road, therefore creating a more sterile environment for the deer because it's less impacted by people, therefore giving you a better hunt.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Which it was 64. I know nobody's going to understand that. I-64, farm equipment, bean field, me. And I was put myself as far from that area as I could essentially and still be hunting the field. So, and all three deer came from that direction. So, that just reiterates your point, which now I'm like rubbing my eyes like, you idiot, which because it makes sense. And I was overthinking it, which is kind of what I was getting at. Like, oh, is my mindset gonna change from bow season to gun season? Like, do I need to be like looking too far? Am I looking too far into it, or is it just the obvious sign of somebody that only hunts bow and somebody that only hunts rifle? They're
I
all looking for the same thing, season permitted, like time of year. But
Yeah, they're all, I mean, if you're a smart hunter, you are, right? You're looking for hot sign. I mean, that's what it boils down to is hot sign. Hot beds, hot food, hot travel routes. Now, I think you're really gonna, after bow hunting, I think you're gonna go into gun season and be like, why did I used to do shit this way? You're
Yeah.
going to just kind of like take a deep breath and feel so relieved because it's going to be hard. It's going to be stressful, but you're going to learn a shit ton of information. And when you go from having to make a 30-yard shot and not being able to make that shot possibly all through bow season and missing bucks, when you pick up that gun, it's like it's like you got lightning in your hand. You know,
Yeah.
you can shoot further, but you've taught yourself through archery season on how to get close to those deer. Now, if you were to teach yourself how to get close to those deer during gun season, you don't give a shit if it's 200 yards because it's close enough. But when you've learned how to get 30, 20, 10, 5 yards and you can smell the deer's breath, when you pick up a gun,
Like,
it's
oh man.
just like a crapshoot, you know? And that's not always the case, but it's because you've become so educated and you've learned so much through those 2 months that it all clicks. I mean, you're more experienced. You spent time in the woods, which is important.
Right, which is the whole point, I guess, like because at this point you just follow the rules, you take your gun and you're just gonna do what's right. And that's part of like you're not gonna learn unless you challenge yourself. And if you just gun hunt the same way your entire life, are you really progressing? As a
No, you
I
you
mean,
don't you don't get the experience, right? You don't get any of the other stuff. If you walk in and you hunt papaws back 40 your whole life and you hunt the same two tree stands, you're not
mhm.
learning anything. You're basically waiting to get lucky. You're not hunting deer. You're waiting for deer. You're not
Right,
going after the hot sign. You're not going after the food. You're literally just hoping that those deer come through there at daylight.
something just walks by. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think a lot of people get, and especially people our age, um, and, I guess our parents' age too. Like back when my grandpa and my dad hunted, that was the thing was to like go out and set up a stand and just like wait it out.
hunt the shit out of it. Yeah,
But that's not really the right good, in my opinion, it's not a good way to approach it. If you're gonna just to give a little just to kind of to show it in a different aspect, if you're gonna go fishing, you don't want to just throw it out there. You want to look for, we'll say bass fishing. You don't want to just throw out in the middle of the lake. You're gonna go for logs, sunken logs, and you're gonna go where the fish live
right,
instead of just the lake. Yeah, you might catch a lunker, but the likely chance of it, unless you're on a private farm, is pretty slim to none.
right. There's still technique. To the naked eye, it might not look like anything,
Hmm.
but you know what you're throwing that lure at, and what you're imagining is going to happen, what's going to be there.
Hmm.
So,
It's
which
important not to get caught in your mind of what the deer what you imagine the deer will do. Look for what the deer are
you
doing.
are doing right. Which noted. I got
Yeah.
a little book of Adam Bowlds secrets. I'm gonna publish this thing one of these days.
Focus on those roads. Obviously, don't shoot towards them, but I shot a lot of deer watching cars and ambulances and cop cars go by.
Uh
And
huh.
I will tell you this: a lot of people, and it might not be your style too. Maybe you're. I'm going where the deer are at. Like if it's not serenity and I don't hear crickets chirping, I love that. But if the deer aren't where the crickets are chirping in the middle of the woods because everybody else is there, I'm going to the highway. And I'll be honest with you, I have killed a lot of deer by the highway because the highway gives me a lot of cover noise. It gives me a lot of movement. I get
Right.
by with more when I'm in line basically with the highway because I'm 20 foot up and I'm down an embankment but 20 foot up. They think that I'm a flash from a car or something if I get caught drawing my bow. It's not so much of a random dude in the middle of the woods. Like
Uh
they're
huh.
used to noise and they're used to smells and they're used to weird shit going on. So you're just another weird thing that's going on. And and one of the deer I was trying to kill last year, didn't end up killing him, but I saw a shit ton of deer out of this stand. I walked 3/4 of a mile up the side of an interstate to get to my woods. And by doing that, I didn't blow a single deer out of the woods because I didn't walk through the center of the woods. As they're bedded down or making their way back, I
Right.
took the highway and then walked 20 yards in the woods, and they never knew I was there. So, I mean,
Which
I think that stuff is overlooked.
I can guarantee that that one deer at 100 yards that was between me and the highway that was just staring at me was thinking, why is that guy climbing that tree? Like there was no cover noise, smells. Like I was the fish in the barrel in that instance, not them. But yeah,
I think wind is, everybody harps on wind, or, people in, I'll say people in the industry harp about wind when you hear about podcasts and wind and all that stuff. But it's essential not to get winded by deer. And I think a lot of gun hunters, a lot of them are successful because deer are rutting and they don't give a shit.
hmm
But when you bow hunt, wind is extremely important. If a deer smells you, they're not coming in. So, I mean, playing the wind is just as important as being able to find the deer, because if you set up and you blow right into their beds, you might as well forget it.
So the stigma,
Except unless it's during the rut, then they might not care.
yeah, the stigma behind bow hunting and people um, are so proud that they're bow hunters, and it's so much harder. It's not. It has almost nothing to do with their ability to shoot the bow. When
Correct.
they say that it's harder, it's because of the time of year and all the physicalities that it doesn't come down to, oh, I just picked up my bow this morning instead of my gun, and it's harder because it takes strength to pull it back. It comes down to the temperature, uh, what they're doing. Like, yeah, they're very calm and they're not running and gunning like they would in the rut. So that's what I was kind of looking for, not
Yeah.
necessarily routine, but what
Yeah, I think
exactly.
that there's a lot more variables. I mean, when you hunt bow season, obviously around here, weather is a concern when it comes to heat. So, like, you're concerned about that. You're also concerned about, like, letting them get to 40 yards. And you're not so much concerned about if you're accurate with your bow in your backyard. It's everything else that can go wrong, I guess,
Yeah.
in the process.
Like, oh, that target in my backyard, it's hurting. Like, I come inside every day and I'm like, oh, I'm on. Daddy is gonna score, but it really hasn't. I mean, it is definitely part of it, and we just spent a half an hour telling people you need to practice. It matters. So not taking away from that, but it certainly is only half of the battle involved. Because
Yeah, I mean, for example, you could be a competition archery shooter in the Olympics, and you can shoot, a fucking wing off a firefly at 200 yards with a bow, but it doesn't make you a good deer hunter because you've only got about 1% of what needs to happen to be able to be successful.
yeah, and it really the opportunity to talk to you about it and like learn is something that not many people get. So a lot of people are like, I'm going to bow hunt this year, and they just fail and
Yeah.
fail and fail, and then they just give up because you're only hearing what grandpa at the gas station is like. Oh, you're hunting, whatever, just some bullshit. But all you know is rut, and that's like what I'm getting at. What I was trying to get out of you was um, not hunting in the rut. There's a difference. The process and
Yeah, I mean, the
everything.
rut is just so random. Go sit in the woods and you're probably gonna like see deer, unless you're just totally fucked. You have like a bad area, or I don't know, you're playing Xbox in the middle of the woods or something, like, I don't know, but, like, if you're gonna bow hunt, in my opinion, you need to put in some time in the woods and figure out a plan. Go in with a plan. Don't just go in and think you're going to just sit on a log and a deer is going to come by and grunt and you're going to shoot it, because you're going to learn real fast that that ain't how it works.
So, as cringy as it may sound, just I know you heard this story, but last year, the one of the last weekend of gun season, we went squirrel hunting under the pretense that where we were going, people aren't going to be deer hunting, and uh, I couldn't even tell you what we were wearing, but it wasn't appropriate for hunting or blending in. Like we were just going to go stalk some squirrels and see if we could find sign. And literally what you just said, sitting on a log. One of us is in fucking blue jeans, big old fuzzy black mustache, like nothing, just a lawyer in the woods, like nothing shy of whatever that picture looks like to you. And three deer within 20 minutes are 6 feet away, just staring, just running, bouncing through, stop. And we're just like, why do we have 22s in our hands right now? Like, how stupid. But they didn't care whether they smelled us or not or heard us, saw us. We were, I was cracking a beer on a log. It was like old Papa's squirrel, story time. And these three deer are just waltzing right by and do not care. And that's just a testament that at that point in time in the year, it's just different.
Yeah.
And if I
Yeah.
could attack in one day in 5 minutes with those three deer, it'd been great. But
We'll have to wrap it up here too, because we're kind of getting at the 2 hour mark. But if you guys want to hear, maybe a second part to this, I'm sure there's plenty of more, maybe questions or concerns or stuff you want to figure out about this. But like, yeah, I mean, you can't hunt the rut the same way that you hunt the rest of the year, because the rut is so unpredictable. I mean, you could go from having that deer show up on camera all the time to rut to it disappearing. Yeah, that's good during bow season, but come rut, deer travel miles, 5-10 miles. It can change really fast, and it's hurtful to some people when they're getting ready to seal the deal on a deer in the next couple days, and rut hits and granddaddy disappears with his new lover. So it can be hurtful
yeah,
to people, but a lot of people can get lucky during it. I've definitely got my fair share of luck during the rut, so I won't complain.
I'm
I hope it never ends.
hoping,
Yeah.
that's all that. Do a little homework and listen to your old buddy Goose, and he'll just, it is a crapshoot no matter what. There's no easy way of doing it. So,
All right, Jared. Well, we'll see if the listeners want to have you back on for more questions, and thanks guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Hunt the Wild podcast. If you enjoyed the show and it's brought you some sort of value, I'd love if you could give me a rating and a review. Just a few seconds of your time can help me better understand the type of content you all enjoy, and it would mean the world to me to hear from all of you.